Have you ever wondered why a persistent ache, a low mood, and a moment of forgetfulness often seem to arrive together as the years pass? We're taught to see these as separate problems, a bad knee here, a touch of brain fog there, each requiring its own specialist and its own pill. But what if we've been looking at the map all wrong? What if these aren't isolated issues at all, but rather different voices singing the same song? To hear the melody clearly, we must stop focusing on the individual instruments and turn our attention to the conductor. Today, we are going to look at the master control center of your entire experience, your nervous system. And what we find there will change how you understand everything from pain to memory. You are listening to the Longevity Library, where we archive the wisdom of healthy aging. The Silent Symphony, understanding the common mechanism behind depression, pain, and memory. As we navigate the years beyond 50, many of us begin to notice changes. It might be a persistent ache that doesn't seem to have a clear cause, a feeling of low energy or mood that's hard to shake, or the frustrating experience of a word being on the tip of your tongue. We tend to think of these as separate issues: a bad knee, a touch of depression, a senior moment. We visit different specialists, receive different diagnoses, and are given different prescriptions, each targeting a single symptom. But what if this approach is missing the bigger picture? What if depression, chronic pain, brain fog, and even the decline in our physical coordination are not isolated problems, but different expressions of a single, underlying issue? To understand this, we must shift our focus away from the individual symptoms and look instead at the master conductor of the entire human experience, the nervous system. We must look at how the brain, that 3-pound universe inside your skull, actually does its work. This is not about simplistic metaphors or unproven theories. It is about foundational biology. By understanding the basic mechanics of how your brain cells communicate, you will gain a powerful new lens through which to view your health, a lens that reveals why lifestyle factors like exercise, learning, and social engagement are not just good for you, but are absolutely essential for maintaining a stable, resilient, and pain-free life. Part 1. The brain's busy bee, a metabolic powerhouse. To understand the system, we first have to appreciate the sheer scale of its operation. Your brain is, in a very real sense, the most expensive real estate in your body. It makes up only about 2% of your total body mass. Yet, despite its small size, it consumes a staggering 20% of your body's energy. Every heartbeat sends about 20% of your blood, carrying oxygen and glucose, the body's primary fuel, directly to your brain. This is a crucial fact. The purpose of blood is to provide the energy required for work. So, the fact that the brain demands such a disproportionate share of resources tells us that it is doing an immense amount of work, far more than the average cell in your body. The brain is a perpetual motion machine, a busy bee that never rests, constantly processing, integrating, and responding to information. What is this constant work? It is the processing of electrical signals. Your thoughts, your memories, your sensations, your ability to move a muscle, even the unconscious regulation of your heartbeat and digestion, everything is, at its most basic level, an electrical event. We measure this electrical activity in units called millivolts. To understand how a healthy system can break down, leading to conditions like chronic pain or depression, we first need to understand the ground rules of this electrical conversation. Part 2. The anatomy of thought, wires, insulation, and connections. We often hear the terms gray matter and white matter, but what do they actually mean in a physical sense? Imagine looking at a computer. The gray matter would be the microchips themselves, the central processing units where the actual computation happens. These are your neurons. You are born with the vast majority of the neurons you will ever have, approximately 100 billion of them. At birth, your brain weighs about 340 grams, or roughly 12 ounces. By the time you reach adulthood, that brain has grown to about 1,450 grams, or 3 pounds. It has increased in weight more than 4 times. But here's the remarkable truth. You have the same 100 billion neurons at birth as you do as an adult. So, if you don't gain new brain cells, what accounts for that massive increase in weight? The answer lies not in the cells themselves, but in the connections between them. As you interact with your environment from the moment you are born, as you learn to focus your eyes, to recognize a voice, to reach for an object, your neurons are busy. They are reaching out, forming tiny connections with other neurons. These connection points are called synapses. Think of each neuron as a tree. The gray matter is the trunk and roots. Over time, that tree grows an increasingly complex and dense network of branches. Each branch represents a synapse, a connection to another tree. On average, a single neuron will make between 4,000 and 10,000 synaptic connections with other neurons. Now, multiply that by 100 billion neurons, and you begin to grasp the almost incomprehensible complexity of the human brain. This massive, intricate web of connections is the physical structure of your memory, your skills, and your habits. Every piece of knowledge you possess, from riding a bike to speaking a language, is encoded in the pattern and strength of these synaptic connections. The increase in your brain's weight from infancy to adulthood is, quite literally, the weight of your accumulated experience, the weight of your synapses. Now, what about the white matter? If the gray matter is the neuron cell body, the branches, axons, that extend from it to connect with other neurons are like electrical wires. And just as an electrical wire needs insulation to prevent the signal from leaking out and to ensure it travels quickly, these neural wires are coated in a fatty, white substance called myelin. This myelin sheath is the white matter. It is essential for fast, clear, and efficient communication between brain regions. This understanding leads to a profound conclusion. Your brain is not a static, hardwired machine. It is a dynamic, ever-changing structure. This concept is known as neuroplasticity. As you learn a new skill, like a new language or how to play a musical instrument, you are literally growing new synapses. Your brain is physically rewiring itself. Conversely, when a skill falls out of use, when you stop practicing the piano or stop playing a sport, those synapses are no longer reinforced. The principle of use it or lose it applies directly to the physical connections in your brain. This ability to change, to grow new connections, does not stop at 20, or 40, or 65. You can be 90 years old and still learn a new skill because your brain retains the capacity to forge new synaptic pathways. Part 3. The battery and the threshold, how a neuron decides to fire. So, we have these 100 billion neurons, each one a tiny biological battery, all connected in a vast network. How does any single neuron decide when to send a signal? The answer lies in a fundamental property known as the resting membrane potential. A neuron at rest is not inactive. It is maintaining a state of readiness, much like a battery holds a charge. There is a stable difference in electrical charge between the inside of the cell and the outside. For the sake of this explanation, let's assign that resting charge a value of minus 50 millivolts. The cell is in a state of dynamic equilibrium, waiting. But it is not just waiting. It is constantly receiving signals from other neurons through its thousands of synaptic connections. These incoming signals are not all the same. They come in two basic types: facilitative or excitatory signals. These signals tell the neuron, get ready to fire. They add a small positive charge to the cell's internal voltage. Think of them as tiny plus inputs. Inhibitory signals. These signals tell the neuron, hold your fire. They add a negative charge, pushing the internal voltage further away from the firing point. Think of them as tiny dash inputs. The neuron is constantly performing a kind of biological math, summing up all these incoming pluses and minuses in real time. This process is called summation. The neuron's internal voltage is not static. It is fluctuating up and down based on the chatter from its thousands of neighbors. This brings us to the critical concept, the threshold of excitation. Let's say that when the internal voltage of our neuron reaches minus 40 millivolts, it hits a tipping point. This is its threshold. If the sum total of all incoming signals manages to push the voltage from minus 50 up to minus 40, something dramatic happens. The cell does not just leak a little signal, it fires with everything it has. It unleashes a massive, all-or-nothing electrical pulse called an action potential. This is the neuron's way of saying, message received and passed on. It's a digital yes/no event. If the summation of signals only brings the voltage to minus 41 millivolts, or if inhibitory signals are keeping it down at minus 55, nothing happens. The signal does not get passed. The neuron's activity is determined by the collective input of the network it belongs to. This system is the foundation of stability in the nervous system. The constant interplay of excitation and inhibition prevents the brain from spiraling into chaos. It ensures that we only react when it's appropriate. Part 4. When the battery is unstable, the biology of hypersensitivity and unresponsiveness. Now we arrive at the crucial link to conditions like chronic pain and depression. Let's consider what happens when this finely tuned system is disrupted. Imagine a neuron whose resting membrane potential is not a stable minus 50 millivolts, but is sitting much closer to the firing threshold, say at minus 45 millivolts. This cell is said to be facilitated or hypersensitive. It doesn't take much to set it off. A signal that would have been insignificant for a healthy neuron, a light touch, a minor sound, a single negative thought, can now be the final push that sends it over the threshold. For this neuron, the world is a very loud, very intense place. Now, scale this up from a single neuron to an entire neural network. If the networks responsible for processing physical sensation are in this hypersensitive state, you have a recipe for chronic pain. The system amplifies normal sensory input. A gentle touch can be perceived as pain. A muscle that is simply tired can send signals that the brain interprets as a sharp, stabbing sensation. The pain is not in your head in the sense of being imaginary. It is very real. But its source is not a damaged tissue in your knee or back. Its source is a malfunctioning signal processing system in your nervous system. The volume knob for pain is simply turned up too high. Conversely, consider a neuron whose resting membrane potential is too low, perhaps at minus 60 millivolts. It is very unresponsive. It requires a massive amount of incoming stimulation to ever reach its firing threshold. This is an inhibited neuron. When we see this pattern across networks in the brain, especially in the regions associated with mood, motivation, and reward, we begin to see the biological underpinnings of depression. The brain's pleasure centers are under-responsive. They don't fire in response to a beautiful sunset, a hug from a grandchild, or the taste of a favorite meal. The world feels flat, gray, and joyless. It's not that the person is choosing to feel sad. The fundamental electrical machinery required to experience positive emotion is not being activated. It's as if the battery in their internal flashlight of joy is dead. This same principle of unresponsivity can explain the cognitive slowing many people experience as they age. If the neural networks responsible for memory retrieval and quick thinking are not firing optimally, it takes longer and more effort to recall a name or process a new piece of information. So, both hypersensitivity, chronic pain, anxiety, and unresponsiveness, depression, brain fog, are two sides of the same coin. They are both symptoms of a nervous system that has lost its optimal level of stability and responsiveness. The system is no longer able to find that ideal balance, where signals are neither amplified into painful noise nor dampened into silent numbness. Part 5. The source code of sensation: how the brain creates your reality. To truly appreciate this, we must understand that the brain does not passively receive information from the body like a camera takes a picture. It actively constructs your experience of reality. Let's go back to the diagram of the 5 cells, A, B, C, D, and E. Cell E is the one we are focusing on. It receives facilitative and inhibitory input from cells A through D. These represent the brain's internal state, its memories, its expectations, its current chemical balance. They are the brain's way of turning the volume up or down on incoming information. Now, imagine that you stub your toe. This event generates a sensory signal. That signal travels up your leg and into your spinal cord, eventually arriving at the network that includes our cell, E. Let's say that signal is worth plus 10 millivolts. Whether that plus 10 signal results in the perception of a sharp, fleeting pain or a debilitating chronic ache depends entirely on the state of cell E at the moment the signal arrives. If cells A, B, C, and D have done their job and are maintaining a stable resting potential, that plus 10 signal might bring the cell to threshold. You feel a sharp pain. You react, and the system returns to baseline. The message has been received and processed appropriately. But if the internal network has made cell E hypersensitive, that plus 10 signal might be the last straw on top of an already unstable state, causing a massive, prolonged firing of the pain network. The resulting pain is wildly out of proportion to the initial stimulus. If the internal network has made cell E unresponsive, that plus 10 signal might not even register. You stub your toe, but the message is lost in a sluggish system. This can be dangerous, as you might not notice an injury. The key takeaway is this: your perception of the world, your experience of pain, your emotional state, are not direct readouts of external events. They are interpretations. They are a construction of your brain, built from a combination of incoming sensory data and the pre-existing state of your neural networks. Your brain isn't just a receiver, it's the broadcaster. It sets the volume for everything you feel. Part 6. Keeping the symphony in tune: the role of activation and movement. If an unstable nervous system is the root cause of so many common ailments of aging, the most important question becomes, how do we maintain stability? How do we keep the resting membrane potentials of our neurons in that optimal, responsive range? The answer is surprisingly simple. Yet it requires a fundamental shift in how we view activities like exercise and learning. We don't do them just to burn calories or build muscle. We do them to actively use our nervous system. Remember, a neuron that isn't used, that doesn't receive input and fire, will become unresponsive. Its connections, synapses, will weaken and be pruned away. The system literally begins to shut down from disuse. When you exercise, you are not just working your heart and muscles. You are sending a massive wave of facilitative signals through your entire nervous system. Every muscle contraction, every stretch, every shift in balance requires thousands of precisely timed signals from your brain and spinal cord. This constant activity is like a tonic for your neural networks. It wakes up sluggish circuits and helps regulate overexcitable ones. It provides the necessary input to keep the system's volume control functioning properly. This is why physical activity is one of the most powerful interventions for both chronic pain and depression. For someone with pain, gentle, consistent movement can help desensitize hypersensitive pain circuits. It teaches the nervous system that movement is safe, that the signal from a joint does not need to be amplified into a pain signal. For someone with depression, exercise directly stimulates the under-responsive reward and motivation centers. It forces them to fire, releasing neurochemicals that improve mood and energy. Similarly, mental exercise is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Learning a new skill, playing strategy games, having a deep conversation, or even navigating an unfamiliar route while driving are all forms of neural activation. They force your neurons to forge new connections, strengthening the white matter pathways and keeping the entire system engaged and responsive. When you stop learning, you stop stimulating those networks, and they inevitably become less responsive. Consider the implications for a healthy, active 70-year-old versus a sedentary 50-year-old. The 70-year-old who regularly walks, gardens, plays bridge, and learns new things is actively maintaining their neural networks. Their brain, though older in years, may be more responsive and resilient than that of the younger person who has fallen into a routine of physical and mental inactivity. The principle is simple. You must use the system to keep the system working. Part 7. A unified view of health. We began by separating the common complaints of aging, depression, chronic pain, memory lapses, into distinct categories. But by understanding the basic biology of the neuron, we can now see them for what they truly are. Different symptoms of a common underlying problem. They are a language, and the underlying condition they are describing is a nervous system that has lost its optimal stability and responsiveness. This unified view changes everything. It means that a treatment for chronic pain that only targets a specific joint, or a treatment for depression that only targets a specific neurotransmitter in the brain, is only addressing the final output of a much larger, system-wide problem. It's like trying to fix a flickering light bulb by painting it, instead of checking the wiring in the whole house. True, lasting health in your later years is not about avoiding every ache or maintaining the cognitive sharpness of a 20-year-old. It is about resilience. It is about having a nervous system that can handle the inevitable stresses and strains of life, a stubbed toe, a sad memory, a new challenge, and return to a calm, stable, balanced state. It is about ensuring that the brain's volume knob isn't stuck on high or low, but can be adjusted appropriately for each situation. This perspective empowers you to take an active role in your own health. The goal is not to find a magic pill. The goal is to engage in the daily practices that keep the master system tuned and functioning. It is to understand that every walk you take, every new word you learn, every problem you solve, and every conscious breath you draw is an investment in the health and stability of your 100 billion neurons. The silent symphony within you is playing all day, every day. Your job, as the conductor, is to ensure the orchestra stays in tune, and the way you do that is through the simple, profound, and lifelong act of staying active, staying curious, and staying engaged with the world around you. The power to influence the stability of your own nervous system is, and always has been, in your hands. The single most important idea to hold on to is this. Your health after 50 isn't about avoiding every ache or stumble, but about cultivating a resilient nervous system that can meet life's challenges and return to a calm, balanced state. This understanding reframes your daily choices, revealing a walk, a conversation, or a new hobby not as simple activities, but as essential investments in the stability of your 100 billion neurons. We'd love to hear how this perspective resonates with your own experience. What helps you keep your own inner symphony in tune? If this archive of wisdom has been valuable, we invite you to explore other videos in our library and subscribe so you never miss a new edition. This is the Longevity Library. Listen, learn, and live longer.